There is something weird about these dynasty prices when you think about the production behind these players, the age, the contract, whatever, and then their actual price in dynasty. Let's start and let's go no further than Indianapolis, Indiana, where we are currently sitting our butts in. And let's talk about Michael Pittman. And when we're talking about Michael Pittman, man, I saw a video from Dynasty Land. You should subscribe to them if you haven't. When they're like basically to sell every single Colt player if you can sell them. And I love those guys, but we're here to splain the Colts offense to everybody right now. We're gonna do some splaining right now because Michael Pittman. I think there's a lot of apprehension around drafting or even owning Michael Pittman because of one guy that doesn't deserve any of this, but one guy named Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, a guy who came into the NFL, obviously was an atrocious passer coming out of college. I mean, you're talking like 50% completion percentage. It's really, really bad, and we understand that, but I think the disconnect for us when you're talking about Michael Pittman, who is ranked 50th on Keep Track, he's the wide receiver 18. This is a guy, Michael Pittman, when you're talking about what he's been able to do the last couple of years since he's been in the league. He was the wide receiver 13 in PPR leagues last year, 17 in 2021, 20 in 2022. And obviously the reason we're expecting Michael Pittman to take a huge step back is because he's playing with Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson's maybe not the greatest quarterback. And Michael Pittman historically in his career has played with really amazing quarterbacks and has really amazing quarterback play. So that's why has Michael Pittman played with? No, that's right, because we're Colts fans. And every quarterback that we have had for the past 4 years has been not good, right?
Yeah, this is Michael Pittman is the post-Luck era.
I mean, you're talking about post-Eagles Carson Wentz throwing him the ball and him being a mid-wide receiver too. You're talking about Matt Ryan. And who else was even the quarterback that year? Nick Foles was the quarterback for a little bit.
Ellinger was as well.
Wide receiver 20 with those quarterbacks. Last year, Gardner Minshew. Guys, Gardner Minshew. So here are the quarterbacks that I just listed. Gardner Minshew, Carson Wentz, Sam Ellinger, Nick Foles, Matt Ryan. But we're worried about Anthony Richardson because Anthony Richardson wasn't a good passer in college. Michael Pittman has proven that he is a wide receiver 2 regardless of quarterback. Anthony Richardson is not worse than Sam Ellinger. He's not worse than Nick Foles. He's not worse than Matt Ryan was. In the small sample size we saw from Anthony Richardson. Look, Anthony Richardson could suck. Michael Pittman's going to get his own. Some receivers like this, who are possession wide receivers, who are going to be working in the middle of the field, getting a lot of targets, getting some targets near the sticks. You're talking about 156 targets, 141 targets. He's never had...
When you're talking about sustainability, you look at the targets. Someone who gets 156 targets doesn't do that flukily. It's not fluky when that happens. You know what's fluky? Is only getting 110 targets and being a wide receiver 1. Or it can be. And there are multiple wide receivers, a cluster of wide receivers going well above Michael Pittman. And again, I understand that there's a reason for that because of the market value. But there is a discrepancy, and there's enough of a discrepancy, enough of a gap that we look at Michael Pittman's price and we look at the wide receivers around him and we're like, I'm getting those targets for a cheaper price in Pittman, and I'm getting 50 less targets at a price that's significantly higher. I'm talking about these guys. I'm talking about Jalen Waddle, who, yes, just got an extension, who, yes, has shown that he can be a wide receiver 1 with those targets. I'm talking about Drake London. I'm talking about Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, Devontae Smith, all of those wide receivers ranked over Michael Pittman and have not even sniffed 156 targets. Haven't sniffed it. And again, some of these guys with less targets have been more productive than Michael Pittman. So what is the counter argument? The counter argument is if you even give 10 or 15 more targets to these guys that are ranked above Pittman, they're still going to outscore him because they do more with the yards. Yes, that is true. But what is the point here? The point is safety and security. And when the cheapest wide receiver of this cluster that we're talking about is the one that's getting the most amount of targets, I don't know what better investment there is in that range. I really, really don't. And I think a lot of this is, and we've seen this with multiple players over multiple years. We're seeing it with T. Higgins right now. The same situation where he's overpriced at a certain point in time. And then some people aren't sold on that price. But a lot of people are in Dynasty. And then he disappoints, loses a ton of value, and doesn't really get close to the previous value that he had when he was getting the same amount of opportunity. The exact same thing is happening with Michael Pittman, but he's on an upward trajectory with opportunity. Upward. It's not stopping. And do I think that he's going to get 180 targets next year because he had 150 last year and 140 the year before and 120 the year before that? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. There could even, honestly, realistically, he could dip down to 140 again. Oh no, 140 targets.
I mean, you're talking about a guy produced as a wide receiver 2, and his touchdowns in the last 3 years, 4 touchdowns, and 6 touchdowns. You, as a dynasty player, there are some players you chase for upside. Some of the guys you mentioned, you're chasing for upside. Nico, Waddle, Tank Dell, you're chasing for upside. Some guys, you just take the safety. Michael Pittman, like, do I think he's massively undervalued in dynasty? Probably not. I wouldn't rank him a whole lot higher than this, but I would rank him higher.
There's a notable discrepancy in targets, though, from every single receiver going ahead of him and going close to after him.
And so we don't there is value in sustainability. There is value in security.
And I think that's the biggest argument here is people are saying that this isn't sustainable. And that this isn't safe.
And if you get in the comments and you're like, well, the Colts offense is going to suck this year, just stop. We're qualified. Listen, we're actually qualified to talk about legit one thing in the NFL that we know anything about, that we'd confidently say, yeah, we know what we're talking about. And what is that, Nathan? It's the freaking Colts.
It's the Colts, and it's the type of offense that they run. And it's the type of targets that Michael Pittman has gotten and will continue to get, whether or not there's a rushing quarterback at the helm or not. It's just what he does. That's why they paid him $25 million a year for the next 3 years. That's why he has contract insulation now. I don't care if A.D. Mitchell is in the offense now. I don't care that they drafted Josh Downs last year. I don't care if they end up getting a really good tight end. Michael Pittman has established within that offense, under multiple coaching regimes at this point, that he will and will continue to get his own. And his own is being that security blanket, essentially. Like, he really is a security blanket for any type of quarterback. Incompetent, immobile, young, inexperienced, rushing, not rushing.
Doesn't matter.
This is why he fits so well into the offense, into a six-back offense, because it is a six-back offense with Anthony Richardson, with Shane Steichen. But again,
it's not a Lamar Jackson,
it's
Greg
not
Roman
a Lamar Jackson
offense.
This is from the Philadelphia Eagles offense. Shane Steichen was the Philadelphia Eagles offense in 2022. Guys, you don't have to go that far back to see multiple wide receiver ones producing, multiple top 16 wide receivers producing in the same year, with a quarterback who ran for like 18 touchdowns that year.
And also was largely considered
15.
unproven before that year. Again,
with less
Pittman,
arm talent.
Do I think he's massively undervalued? Probably not. I do think he's trending down. And that makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And because every other receiver that was priced in his range that got a contract at the same time went up a full round.
And 2 years ago, Pittman was going in the third, and we were the first to tell you we weren't taking him there. We're like, you're taking him too high. This is ridiculous. It was after his 2022 year.
We are very well aware of what Michael Pittman is. He is a high-end wide receiver 2, at best a low-end wide receiver 1, production-wise.
And you're getting him for that exact price, wide receiver 18.
Again, this is about the price, not so much our opinion of the player. Our opinion of a Colts player is always going to be relatively positive, except for A.D. Mitchell. I really have no idea what to think about him. With Pittman, though, look, if you had Pittman going in the same range as Waddle and Ayuk and Nico, and you have one of those guys like, say, Nico or Ayuk, that was what Pittman's price currently is, we would be all over those. We would be all over that guy.
Oh, yeah.
All over him. But we would be saying the exact same thing. So don't just take it as like, oh, we're being ignorant and we're just saying that, take our word for it because we think this player is good. We just laid down and we gave you statistical evidence, situational evidence, and historical evidence for why Michael Pittman is a good pick at his price.
It's not the fact that he's a Colt. It's the fact that as a dynasty asset, he's shown us what he is. Just take him for what he is.
Just take it.
Tank Dell is next on this list in terms of, like, you sure about that?
Yeah, Tank Dell's an interesting guy.
He's right behind him.
He is right behind him.
Yeah.
He's fluctuated a little bit in value here and there, obviously, because of the dig stuff. But I'll tell you what, I can't stop telling people to target Tank Dell in a lot of team blueprints. And if you want one of those team blueprints, you can go over to flockfantasy.com/domain. You don't have to use code domain anymore. You can, and you get a discount for a blueprint when you use code domain and sign up for the Mother Flocker tier. But you can buy as many blueprints as you want, anytime you want. When you go to flockfantasy.com, you can buy our team blueprint. We will give you customizable advice on any roster of your choosing.
Also, a big announcement. We do have now a weekly podcast where we talk about things we don't typically talk about on either of our YouTube channels, where you can kind of hear us talk football, talk more overall general football through a dynasty fantasy lens.
It is a show about fantasy football.
It's called a show about fantasy football. So the link's going to be in the description. You can listen to this anywhere you listen to podcasts, but if you want more content, and content is good, and more of it is good, and you're a podcast person,
yes,
there you go. Come join us on that ride as well. But talking here about Tank Dell, again, this is a guy that even in the last couple days, you've seen his value kind of go because we've seen videos of him on the field. That's it.
It is pretty funny.
We are in the portion of the offseason where
it's a little tiny spike. I'm sure it'll come back down.
This is what I like to call the ladder drill portion of the offseason, because it's when you go to Twitter and you see Lad McConkey doing his, and everybody's like, I've got to rank that guy higher in my dynasty rankings.
Higher, much higher.
There's something more secure.
He's getting all those second team. He's getting all of those second team targets.
You know, the only thing more secure than a 4-year fully guaranteed contract on an elite offense in a value insulated position? It's freaking ladder drills, dude.
Ladders.
They are insane. Like, that's the dynasty.
That's why they got drafted, dude.
Like,
they don't watch no film.
3-year dynasty
They don't watch
lifetime.
anything. They look at them do their ladders.
The ladders, man.
We do like our ladders. Like Tank Dell. Tank Dell is a guy that honestly was kind of all said jokingly, because he hasn't increased in value that much because of the ladders and stuff. But with Tank Dell, it's as simple as this. He is the cheaper of Nico Collins and Tank Dell. He's the cheaper option right now. And what's the difference right now? And why is Nico Collins ranked so much higher? It is now the contract insulation. He now has multiple years tied to CJ Stroud. But for me, I'm looking purely at this is the thing that drove me crazy. We did this video. We tried to help you guys. We tried to help you. We're trying to be honest, trying to be helpful, super duper helpful, and just saying that, like, hey, you might want to be a little cautious with Nico Collins' price right now, given what he did with limited opportunity last year, and how that might not be sustainable if he's not going to get more targets, especially since like Stephon Diggs is now entering the offense as well. Just a little like caveat, little asterisk, just be a little careful with Nico Collins and his price right now. And a bunch of people in the comments were telling us like, that's a terrible take. You can't say that because he was injured. Look at what he did when he was actually on the field versus not on the field. I was like,
they all played the same amount of games.
They played
15 to 16. Every single one of them.
Right. And Tank Dell and Nico Collins were both about 7 targets per game.
Almost the same.
Almost the same, and they both were very, very effective with those targets. What does that tell me? When I am projecting out what these guys are going to do from a production perspective going into 2024, absolutely gosh dang nothing. Nothing.
No.
Nothing.
You don't know.
0. You know, like in Mission Impossible and Fallout, that guy comes at the beginning of the movie and he talks to Ethan Hunt and he's like, I've gone through this business. I've survived this business by a voice that tells me something in my head. And Ethan's like, well, what does it tell you? He says absolutely nothing about him. This is what I feel like with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. My voice, my internal voice, don't listen to my internal voice because it's not saying anything. My price voice is saying Tank Dell because he's the cheaper price. If you don't know, if you have no idea, just take the guy who's cheaper. Significantly cheaper. Again, if the price discrepancy were a little bit smaller, then I'd be like, yeah, just pay up for the contract insulation.
Yeah.
But the gap is widening quite a bit for the same amount of targets per game.
It seems for some reason that the little voice in everybody else's head is telling them, hey, Nico's the clear wide receiver 1. Bye. Like, I understand. I understand the risk with Tank Dell. I understand why we're favoring Nico, but I honestly think that we're kind of, for us, based on what we saw on the field when both of these guys played last year. I mean, Tank Dell, before he went down for injury, he had 25, a 20-point game. He had a 29, he had 18, he had 28, he had 17. The guy was tearing it up as much, if not more, at the time than Nico Collins was tearing it up. And so to act like A, Tank Dell's not going to have an effect on Nico Collins' production is wrong. B, that Tank Dell can't come back in and be the wide receiver 1 in Houston is wrong. That's incorrect. It is absolutely plausible that there's a scenario where Tank Dell comes back in and he is the wide receiver 1 in that offense, right? Look at the targets he was getting. He was having games of 10, 14, 11, 10 targets. That's 4 double-digit target games in the half a season that he played. When you're looking at Nico Collins in the entire season had only 3 double-digit target games. Tank Dell in half a season had more games with double-digit targets than Nico had the entire season. And when we're talking about a wide receiver 1, we're talking about targets. And yes, from a fantasy perspective, you also have to talk about scoring. And Nico had a lot of big plays, had a lot of touchdowns, and did something last year that catapulted him up to the wide receiver 12 in PPR leagues. Totally understand that. You want to chase fantasy points. You want to win your leagues. Here's what I'd say. We've already said this. Nico probably not going to repeat that performance in terms of efficiency from a fantasy perspective. But with Tank Dell, you have somebody that is a little bit safer, honestly. When you're talking about sustainability, what Tank Dell was doing last year through the first however many games, although he was scoring a lot of touchdowns before he went down, and that's obviously more volatile, just like Nico. Tank Dell, in terms of the targets, he was getting safer targets than Nico was when they were both on the field. And so, do I blame people for ranking Nico higher? No, not at all. In fact,
some of the
I'm
reason
ranking Nico higher.
Some of the reason Tank Dell was getting so many of those targets when they both were on the field is because Nico is more of a problem. Honestly, in the short,
going to attract defenses.
Exactly, because he's a bigger body. He can do short, intermediate targets. He can be a big play threat down the field. Tank Dell is just and obviously Tank Dell can do more than that. I'm kind of just exaggerating the situation, but honestly, if I'm a defense and I'm getting ready to play the Houston Texans, I am more worried about a matchup nightmare against Nico Collins than I am Tank Dell.
Yeah. So I think all we're saying here is, don't underestimate Tank Dell, and also don't write him off as like the clear wide receiver 2 or 3 in Houston.
Yeah.
There is a chance he is the wide receiver 1. At least a chance.
Yeah.
You guys don't watch football, clearly, if you think Tank Dell has a chance to be a wide receiver.
They're in the same division as us.
Like
we watch them multiple times.
We're obligated to watch him at least a couple times a year, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about Kyren, because Kyren Williams is a guy, I think he's been, when you're talking about the standard deviation or ADP database, he's been one of the highest movers and lowest movers at different periods of time in the offseason. And when you're talking about his current price in community rankings right now, Kyren Williams is ranked as the running back 10, which in Dynasty doesn't really tell you anything, right? Because running back 10 means you're being ranked around Jonathan Brooks and Kenneth Walker, James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, ETN. I don't know. Here's what we do know. His price has decreased from the end of the season where he was the running back 5 to the running back 10. A lot of people had him as their top 5 running back in Dynasty Fantasy Football, and then everybody kind of either A, got smart, or B, got low, and we're like, yeah, we're not going to do this with Kyren anymore. So let's talk facts with Kyren. Kyren Williams was the second highest points per game in the NFL among running backs last year from a fantasy perspective, second only to Christian McCaffrey, 24.7 points per game for Christian McCaffrey, 21.5 points per game for Kyren Williams, 21.5. The next closest person had 17.98 fantasy points per game. He was in a tier of his own. McCaffrey, Kyren Williams, everyone else.
Yep.
McCaffrey's in his own tier, Kyren Williams in his own tier, and everybody else in a tier. So when you're talking about how sustainable was that production, because here's what this is with Dynasty. We do this, and this is dumb. We do this, and we need to stop doing this. Blake Corum has always been a prospect where it would be really cool for Dynasty players, really cool for him, really cool for everybody who's kind of followed him through the scouting process.
Super cool.
If Blake Corum panned out in the NFL because of the way he plays, because he got a lot of touchdowns at Michigan, and because he was a high volume guy, and because he was really good as he developed in college, because
fun to watch. He's definitely a
he's fun to watch.
Guy.
So when
He's
you have fun to watch Dynasty assets, typically you have the Dynasty community kind of rooting for him, and even if they don't realize it, pushing his value up behind him.
Yeah.
And so not only has it pushed Blake Corum's value up, it's pushed Kyren Williams' volume down. And when you're talking about, look at Sean McVay in terms of the history of the number of carries he gives his running backs. He has been surprisingly bell cow at times. There have been times in Sean McVay's offense where he's been pretty committed to running backs at times.
He gets the most out of his running backs that are actually good, and Kyren Williams is one of those highly effective running backs. He didn't have that between Gurley and Kyren Williams. Almost had it in Cam Akers. He was getting ready to do that, and then he went down with the Achilles and had all those injuries and then all that stuff. But that's really why there was such a significant gap there.
Yes.
But you're right. Like, Gurley was a huge one. Kyren now, and everyone's like, oh, we didn't see that one coming.
When Cam Akers was good, he was leaning on Cam Akers.
Yes.
And so with Kyren, the red flag of red flags here that we would tell you first it's a red flag is that he was third in the NFL in touchdowns. He only played 12 games. He had 15 touchdowns in 12 games. That is volatile and unsustainable. But it's not all bad for Kyren because there's another, when you're talking about sustainability for running backs, there's another metric I like to look at, and that metric is targets per game.
Targets.
And there were, if I'm not mistaken, 14 players that had over 4 targets per game last year. Kyren Williams came right in at the end of that and averaged 4 targets per game. He was 15th and 14th
More
in the
than
league.
Tony Pollard.
More targets than Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, Joe
That's
Mixon,
impressive.
Antonio Gibson, Isaiah Pacheco, Devon Achane per game. This is a per game thing. James Cook, he had a target. So when I'm looking for targets in a running back, like he's actually getting them. So I don't think it's all unsustainable. I don't think it is. Like he had 32 receptions. He on 48 targets. He had 206 yards. He had 3 receiving touchdowns. Part of the reason is points per game. I mean, you're talking about 18 all-purpose touchdowns last year in 12 games. That's not happening again. But to act like the reason for Kyren Williams' drop-off is going to be Blake Corum.
Corum.
Historically, did I say it like
Yeah,
that?
it was pretty funny, yeah.
You sure about that?
I might be exaggerating
You're
it,
exaggerating
but
that. I don't think
I
said
heard
like
it in
that.
my ear.
If you think that Blake Corum is going to be the reason for Kyren Williams' fall off, I really don't think that's going to be it. I really don't.
At least not this year. And I think what we have learned, in addition to McVay leaning on his bell cow running backs at times, is that running backs in a McVay offense are expendable, and they always will be. He's literally vowed to never pay a running back ever again. And I believe it. I don't think he'll ever pay a running back again. I think when Kyren Williams' rookie contract is up, he's out. Bye-bye. It will be Blake Corum.
Bye.
It
Have a
will
great
be
time.
Blake Corum's time. And when you're looking at 2025, maybe Corum starts getting an increased workload. But what people are expecting this year from Corum, I think, is a little bit hasty. Don't be hasty.
Don't be hasty.
And I think that while Kyren Williams is still fresh and ready to go, why not just keep leaning on him while he's productive? Like if you want to be effective as an offense, and to me, it's about the price. Again, the production that you're getting at his current respective price is something that you're not going to see. You're not going to see anywhere else. Like the guys going around his range, Kenneth Walker, not going to be close to that production. Isaiah Pacheco, not going to be close to around that production. Heck, even, jeez. Is this bold of me to say ETN is not going to get that production? Like,
well, I mean, last year when they played, ETN had 16 points per game, 5 less than Kyren Williams. Listen, I think it's less about what he's going to do this year and more about the fact that his value is being brought down by Blake Corum.
Yeah, we are very, very understanding of the risk, but the risk is now being baked into his price. Yeah. Because everyone knows what's going to happen to his value in a couple of years. But what do we do in Dynasty Fantasy Football? We play it in 3-year windows, and 2 of the next 3 years, Kyren Williams is probably going to be a big reason that you can make a contending push.
It's very truth. That's very true.
Yeah, the next guy that we're going to have here is Christian Watson. This has been a pretty positive video up until this point because we've liked a lot of these guys' price. But I have a question about Christian Watson's current value and current price right now for a different reason, and that's the other side. That's the why is his price this high? Christian Watson had a really, really, really awesome stretch, historic stretch as a rookie. 3 years ago.
A long time ago.
And it's 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. But look, oh boy, what do I do? Tell me, what do I do? Avery, what do I do with Christian Watson at ADP 100, going around the same price range as DeAndre Swift, Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Watson, Bo Nix. Let me look at some of the guys that he's being ranked ahead of. Derrick Henry, Amari Cooper, Ramondre Stevenson just got a new deal. Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, your early second round picks, early to mid second round picks like Xavier Legette, A.D. Mitchell, George Kittle. When is the theoretical, hypothetical upside with Christian Watson
This year. This is the year.
Going to
This is it.
no, but when's that going to end? When is? I know it's only been 2 years, and you got to wait for that 3rd year breakout. And this is the year for Christian Watson, just like this is the year for who the frick else, Jameson Williams. But dude, I have so many issues with Jameson Williams' price right now. He is 2 full rounds cheaper than Christian Watson, and they are both as unproven.
I mean, we talk a lot about
Christian Watson has, in fairness, done a little bit more than Jameson Williams, but not enough for me to say that he's more proven because he hasn't shown it on a consistent basis and hasn't shown that he can command a significant amount of target volume. Heck, even last year, he had 1 game with 8 targets last year. The rest was inconsistent. Oh, he had a 9-target game. Okay.
I has data.
The injuries, all this stuff. Yeah, let's hear the data.
He averaged 5.9 targets per game last year. Here are some guys around that targets per game threshold. Elijah Moore at 6.0. Josh Palmer at 6.1. Tyler Boyd, 5.8, so 0.1 less. Curtis Samuel, 5.7. Jonathan Mingo averaged the same amount of targets last year as Christian Watson on a per-game basis, accounting for injuries. Injuries are not taken into account here. It is per game.
Per game.
Jonathan Mingo has as many targets. So did Romeo Doubs on the same team. So did Demario Douglas on the Patriots. So did Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and Noah Brown. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then Robert Woods. Bob Woods. Guys.
Bob Woods.
Bobby.
Here's what I want to understand. And that is Jaden Reed, who has the same draft capital investment as Christian Watson, as a rookie, was more productive than Christian Watson, outproduce him when he was on the field. How can we look at those two players and how can we knock Jaden Reed's price because of Christian Watson and what he could do, what you want him to do that Jaden Reed is doing for you? I know that they are different skill sets. I know that they could, in theory, be complementary. I know that Jaden Reed cannot function as an alpha wide receiver. But neither can Christian Watson, dude. Even in the games where he had a significant amount of targets, he turned them into 6 points, 4 points, 10 points, 5 points. One of his high target games, he had 27 points before he went down. Took 2 touchdowns. The other 20-point game, a touchdown. And 19 yards per reception in that game as well.
That's what you see. That's what you see.
Big play.
Right? I mean, that's the type of receiver he is.
Yes.
And we like the way he plays. He's got a sexier style, so we just don't want to. No. On the flip side of that, you have a guy, Amari Cooper, who averaged 8.5 targets per game last year. This is going to good for, 16th in the league, 15th in the league in targets per game last year on the Browns, where Joe Flacco was throwing him the ball a good amount of the time. Joe Flacco from when I was 12.
Yeah, that one.
The same guy. And so Amari
That's
Cooper,
not his son. That's still him.
No, it's still him. He's 30 now. Last year, he was the wide receiver 20. He had 128 targets. He had 1,250 yards. He had only 5 touchdowns, and he did all that. Okay, sound great, right? And yes, he's getting old, but we see the big 3-0, and we freak out, and then we take his dynasty value down to wide receiver 40. Wide receiver 40, guys.
Goodness.
This is a guy where if you're flexing Amari Cooper on a week-to-week basis in a dynasty league, you're feeling really good about that. You're feeling really good about the production you're getting with Amari Cooper because, again, he is going to probably be a wide receiver too. In terms of competition, they brought in Jerry Jeudy. Okay. Oh, that's the LeBron meme where he's like, oh, that's what it is because it's Jerry Jeudy, right? We know what Jerry Jeudy is. You've got Njoku, who got his own last year, and Amari Cooper was still a wide receiver too. You're getting him for, let's see. You're getting him for Ricky Pearsall.
That's a mid-second round pick.
You're getting him for, ironically enough, Christian Watson.
That is very irony.
It is ironies. You're getting him for Xavier Legette, Adonai Mitchell. You're getting him for Jake Ferguson. Blake Corum. What is... Whew. It's lots of dynasty cringe right now.
Yes.
Blake Corum, 15-spot riser in the last couple days. Who is Bub Means? I keep seeing him on here.
I have no idea.
He's a wide receiver for... I've never heard of this guy. I do this for a living, and I've never heard of this guy.
It's got to be a joke, right?
No.
It's got to be a joke.
He plays for the Saints.
No.
This is a real thing.
No.
He's 23. He was a fifth-round pick this year. Bub Means is the biggest 30-day riser.
Holy crap. Never heard of him.
I've never heard of that guy. And neither has he. We live and breathe fantasy football.
We watched the whole draft. How did I space that?
I don't know. But either way.
George Kittle is really, for the same reason as Amari Cooper, going in the same price range.
the most consistent tight end.
The most consistent, cheapest, top 6 producing tight end. What do we always say in Dynasty Fantasy Football? Only the top 6 producing tight ends matter. They are the only ones that give you a competitive advantage. We have done the maths. We have done the statistical research. We have taken hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leagues, looked at the winners of those leagues, seen what tight ends they went through for the entire season, and 80% of them had top 6 producing tight ends. You don't believe us? I can give you the data. I can. It doesn't mean that if you don't have a top 6 producing tight end that you're not going to win your championship. It just means that the only competitive advantage that you're going to have with a tight end is not with a Jake Ferguson. It's not with a Pat Fryermuth. It's not even with a Cole Kmet being tight end 7. It's not. The line is 6 at best. 6 at best. In non-tight end premium, it's the top 3 to 4.
Yep.
Again, you don't believe me? I'll give you the data. Trust us on this one and take the price with George Kittle and stop saying that he's injury prone. He misses 2 games a year. Maybe. He was fully healthy last year and didn't miss a single game. Yeah, he's hit or miss here or there. His boom games are 40 points. His bust games are like 8 points.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. We got to stop. 31 minutes. And we have a live stream in 5 minutes. So make sure you drop a like on this video and make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure flockfantasy.com. Use any code you want, but sign up with code domain for the annual Mother Flocker Show. You get a free team blueprint, which is a comprehensive multi-year plan for your dynasty team. If you're another code user, if you're not a member, or if you're a code domain user wanting another one, get as many of these as you want now on the Flock Fantasy store. You can buy them and we'll give them to you as well. Also, podcast, a show about fantasy football. We're going to call it a show about fantasy football. Check it out anywhere you listen to podcasts. And
what's it about?
It's about fantasy football. It's a show about fantasy football. This is a show about me saying, see you later. Thanks for watching.